Hi everyone, welcome to the channel, and welcome to the first chess study of the day. So here we have a study composed by Leonid Kubbel, one of the greats of chess study composition, and it was composed in 1934. So if you want to solve this at home, the task is white to play and win, and I would suggest putting a timer for about 10 minutes to try and see if you can get everything worked out here. So when we take a look at this study, white's up a pawn, and so white's of course going to try and win, and it turns out that if black has the time to make a move like rook f3 or rook h3, black should be okay. Like for example, after rook a8, rook f3, or rook h3, black should be okay because black's pieces are well placed, and white's extra pawn isn't quite sufficient here to win the game. So white needs to play with tactics, in fact. So one of the first moves you might have thought about is bishop e1, with the intention that rook h3, for example, allows rook a4, followed by taking the bishop. The issue with bishop e1, though, is that black has a nice move, rook e3. Now there's no time for rook a4, because black will take this bishop. And now after rook e3, white needs to take bishop takes bishop, and after king takes bishop, this is a drawn position, because the rook endgame is white only has an extra pawn, right, and black's pieces are well placed. So this is going to be a draw. So when we return, we know that bishop e1 isn't quite going to work, and a simple move like rook a8 isn't quite going to work. So that's what leaves the best move for white, and the right move, rook a4. So now, white pins the bishop and has a threat of rook takes bishop followed by bishop e1. For instance, after king b5, white would take the bishop, and after king takes rook, play bishop e1, take the rook, and win the game. So that's white's threat. So black has to move the rook away. And the issue is that if rook h3, for example, or rook f3, either way, white plays bishop e1 and plays rook takes bishop. And compared to the bishop e1 example, when white played bishop e1 on the first move with rook e3, and now black's okay. Now here, after rook a4, there's no chance for rook e3, because the bishop will just take it. So it seems like black's just going to lose instantly here, but there's actually an interesting defense black tries. Here it is. Black plays rook a3. This is a really good move. Black's still losing, but this is a good defensive try. So now, first of all, we notice that white can't take twice on a3, like so, because of king c3, and black wins the pawn back with a draw. So white can't take twice on a3, and also taking once, and then moving the king, is also going to be quite drawn. Or maybe even king c3 here. Either way, this is quite drawn. So white can't take, and so it's an interesting position because it looks like black is achieving the draw here. And if you didn't get it up to this point when you were solving it, I would even invite you to pause the video here and try and figure out what white does. I'll tell you now, the answer is rook takes bishop. This is a really nice sacrifice. King takes bishop is forced. And now, you may have thought that the move is bishop c5, trying to win back the rook, but actually it's not, because after takes king a3, this is going to be a drawn pawn endgame. Because after king c4, the thing to know is that this is going to be a draw because white isn't able to get this king to these three highlighted squares. Like this is a known thing in pawn endgames where when it's king and pawn versus king, you want to get the king to one of the three squares 2 steps in front of the pawn. So, like for example, if the pawn were on f4 instead, you'd be looking to get the king to these three squares. So it's like you want the king on the three squares, uh, 2 steps in front of the pawn and adjacent to those. That's how you know if it's going to be a win. So for example, this pawn endgame is going to be a draw because uh, white isn't able to get a king to those squares. So for example, it'll just follow a sequence like the one I'm showing here, where it just ends up in a stalemate at the end of the game, like so. So the point is that that pawn endgame isn't what we want, and after rook b4, king b4, the best move is not bishop c5, but bishop e1. Check. And now the king has to go to a4 to keep protecting the rook. And now here's where white is a very nice resource. Bishop c3. And now black is in Zugzwang. No king moves, because if king b5, white just takes on a3. White just takes the rook. And there's no rook moves other than rook takes c3. Rook b3 will take, same with a2 and a1. And after king c3, this is totally different, because white gets the king to the desired square. And this is a standard win for white. For example, for king b5, king d4, king c6, king c4, this is a standard win where white wins by outflanking the other king and promoting the pawn. Like so. And for example, after here, this is good enough. You play c4, and this is going to be a standard win where white promotes the pawn. Like so. Hope you enjoyed this study, which was composed by Leonid Kubbel in 1934, and I hope you tune into the next chess study tomorrow. Thank you.